Hello, Internet, and thank you very much for tuning into the Cloud Native Islamabad YouTube channel. And thanks for your patience. And sorry for the delayed start. So I see a bunch of folks on the watching us, and I'm seeing more and more traffic coming into this channel because of we are covering the CKA hands-on exam to help you ace the exam in fine color. So what we had in the agenda we have, so if you want to alleviate your Kubernetes skill to the next level and improve your expertise with a CKA certification, join us for an exclusive workshop designed to guide you through the essential and tips for acing the CKA exam. So we will start highlighting understanding the exam curricular from the CK exam. Then we have a prerequisite steps that you needed to understand carefully before jumping into the exam. And then we have a list of curated hands-on practice. And then we will help you learn how to navigate and effectively use the Kubernetes official documentation and some command line proficiency and some tips and tricks to secure your exam while you're actually going through it. So hang tight, ask your question live, and we'll be looking forward to it. So before any more delays, let me go straight to Chad. And thank you very much, Chad. You're now live on the screen, and just give us a quick intro, and then we start the proceeding.
Hey everyone. My name is Chad Kroll. I am a author of the book Acing the Certified Kubernetes Administrator Exam. I'm also a Kubernetes administrator myself at a company called Raft, and I'm also a CNCF ambassador. And I'm happy to be here with you today to share what I know about the Certified Kubernetes Administrator, the CKA exam is what we call it, and go through some exercises with you today. So I think I've delayed long enough, so I'll dive right into it if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Surely. So once again, I just be going off the screen. The chat will be there for your question. So before that, and let us know if you're actually having any difficulty on the mic or the voice or anything with the screen. Hope you will able to see the screen that the chat is sharing right now. If you don't, please let me know in the chat section as well. And thank you very much for seeing a bunch of the folks online and ask question as we go live, and I will consider those during the conversation as chat wanna go. So before any delay, let's go straight to the chat. Your screen is visible for myself, and let's go to the agenda.
Yeah, that sounds great. So today we're talking about the Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam, which is by far the most popular exam out of all the Kubernetes certification exams. There's the CKAD, which is the Certified Kubernetes Application Developer. There's the this one, the Certified Kubernetes Administrator, CKA, and then there's also the Kubernetes Security Specialist exam, which is the CKS. We're going to be talking about the CKA today, which, as you can see on my screen, is a screenshot of the Linux Foundation site where you can purchase the exam. So the exam is $395, and I've created this short link for you, easy to remember, studykates.club/CKA-schedule, and you can be directed directly to this page, and you can find out more about the exam, but also hopefully schedule the exam and get that on the calendar. I've really found that this is the primary way to really create some discipline around actually studying and going for the exam. You can always reschedule it if you need, but this is a good marker for, let's say you schedule it for 2 months from now. It's a really good it's really good for motivating you to study and actually have an end date in mind to pass this exam. And with this exam comes an exam simulator, which you can see in the middle of the screen, provided by Killer Shell or killer.sh. And this is free with the exam voucher. So you pay $395 and you get one of these exam simulators for free. What that does is allows you to practice and simulate the exam before you take it. So this is really helpful for going through what the exam will be like, and that experience will be very hands-on in that the exam is entirely in the terminal. So the exam simulator simulates that experience. And so this is not like, as I just mentioned, this is not like any other exam. This is not multiple choice. It's not fill in the blank. It's not anything like that. It's very different in that you are connected to a machine via RDP, and then you're given a Linux terminal, and you're expected to perform the kubectl commands and subsequent commands, maybe systemctl or maybe others of the like, to navigate and troubleshoot problems related to your cluster, and deploy applications and stuff that we'll get into in a bit here. There is partial credit for those tasks that you're tasked with. So just know that there's some opportunity to get partial credit there, and also there is a free retake for the exam. So even if you fail it the first time, you have the opportunity to take it a second time at a different time to try it again for free. My book is called Acing the Certified Kubernetes Administrator Exam. You can go to acingthecka.com to be directed to the Manning site. Manning's is the publisher that publishes this book, and it encompasses the exam entirely, and it follows very closely the exam curriculum. And so Chapter 1 is an introduction to the exam and getting you familiar with what a Kubernetes cluster is, and talking about the Kubernetes API. Pardon me. Chapter 2 is getting familiar with the cluster itself and the difference between the control plane components and the worker components, or the worker nodes. Chapter 3 is role-based access control and identities. So talking about roles, cluster roles, cluster role bindings and role bindings, and how we can authenticate to the API. Chapter 4 includes deploying applications to Kubernetes, which, in the form of a deployment or just a single pod. How do you actually get your applications to run on Kubernetes? Chapter 5 is maintaining running apps in Kubernetes. So once you've deployed those apps, how do you maintain them over time, such as scaling, such as being able to roll back and roll to a new version of the app, and be able to troubleshoot certain things with the app, such as change node selectors and being able to schedule those apps to different nodes within the cluster. Pardon me again. Chapter 6 is communication. So this is the networking part. This is where we get into talking about the container networking interface and talking about pod-to-pod communication. Also, we'll get into the cluster IP, node port, and load balancer type services that provide a load balancing mechanism essentially to applications running on pods. And then we get into ingress as well in Chapter 6. Chapter 7 includes storage. So this is where we talk about the persistent volumes, persistent volume claims, and storage classes. And then finally, Chapter 8 is troubleshooting. Troubleshooting is 30% of the exam. So you'll see that if you tune into the exam curriculum, which you can locate on the CNCF website. And speaking of, I've created this short link for you, studykates.club/tka-handbook, which is the handbook for any questions that you may have preparing your environment, any things that are allowed or disallowed for the exam. And another interesting fact about this exam is that it's entirely it's remote. So you have to take it from the comfort of your own home, which can be nice or not nice, but there's no way to go to a testing center to take this exam. The handbook will also tell you that there's 15 to 20 performance-based tasks, and we'll have those tasks that we discussed before, which include performing those kubectl commands or the like inside of the terminal. You have 2 hours to complete those 15 to 20 performance-based tasks. So 2 hours seems like a lot, but it does go by quickly. So we've incorporated shortcuts into the book, and to give you tips on, using shortcuts in your commands, but also how to create a template for your YAML files, and just be able to be most efficient and utilize the 2 hours to the greatest extent you can. And it's not to say that it's impossible to, to complete all of those tasks in the 2 hours, but it is going to go by faster than you think. So there's a need for those efficiencies. The exam takes place in the PSI bridge. So the PSI bridge is the RDP environment that I was talking about before, where you download the PSI browser, and through that browser, you get remotely connected to the machine that you'll be taking the test from. So this includes the exam questions on the left-hand side. I'll show a screenshot of it in a second, but the exam questions will be on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side will actually be a Linux desktop in kind of a GNOME-like desktop, and includes the basic things that you would see in a desktop. So the terminal, and Mozilla Firefox is the browser that's the only browser available to use for having documentation open. Speaking of, this exam is an open book, so you can have the Kubernetes documentation open, as well as the Kubernetes blog open while you take the exam. You can only have one tab open to each domain, being the documentation or the blog, but it is open book in that you can look up the answers to the questions while you're taking the exam in that RDP environment. So that's really nice. However, just keep in mind that you do have that 2 hours. So I would get familiar with the documentation beforehand, so that you're not taking a lot of time reading the documentation. As I mentioned, this exam includes a free practice test, so you can utilize the Killer Shell practice test, or the exam simulator is what it's called, to go through questions, exam-like questions, as well as I would recommend going through all the practice questions in the book as well. There's over 70 questions that I've included in my book. And so I encourage you, the more practice, the better. And then, as I mentioned, there's a free retake for this exam. So go ahead and schedule your exam today. I highly encourage you to do that. And then don't be afraid to just go ahead and do it. And then if you fail it, that's okay. You have a free retake. You can take it the next week if you'd like, and have a second shot at it. So it's really no pressure. There are 5 domains in the curriculum. So troubleshooting being the most, 30%, as I mentioned before. Troubleshooting will encompass a lot of the tasks on the exam. Storage is only 10%, which is the least amount. Services and networking, 20%. Workloads and scheduling, 15%. Architecture, installation, and maintenance, including upgrading your Kubernetes control plane components, which is 25%. So this breaks it down into what are the type of tasks that you really need to focus on more. Obviously, storage, you don't need to focus too much on, but I would highly encourage you to really get familiar with troubleshooting, because that's what you'll be tasked with most on the exam. So spend the most time on the troubleshooting chapter, which is the very last chapter of the book. And again, I've created a short link for you, studykates.club/CKA-domains, to get familiar with each of these domains and what's covered in each of these domains. So the exam environment, as promised, I included a screenshot, and it's kind of, the resolution is not that great. I think it's not that great on purpose, but I got this directly from the CKA handbook, or the CNCF handbook, which includes the CKA and CKAD. And so this is what the exam environment will look like. As I said, on the left-hand side, you'll see a set of questions in paragraph form. So there'll be, task 1 is maybe creating a pod. Task 2 is, assigning a label to that pod. Task 3, or I should say, task, 1A, 1B, and 1C will each be, a portion of that task on the left-hand side there. And then on the right-hand side, you'll have your terminal up, much like the picture here, and you can perform those kubectl commands to complete the task. And then, as I mentioned, the browser that you'll use is the Mozilla Firefox browser. So just be familiar with how to find in the browser, and that it's in the lower left-hand corner instead of the upper right-hand corner like most browsers, or at least in the Chrome browser. And so you'll be able to not only search the documentation with the with the native search within the website, so in the upper left-hand corner, but you also be able to use the search within a page itself to, let's say, search the kind of pod, or search for, a lot of times you'll be searching for YAML, so that you can copy and paste the YAML directly from the documentation into the terminal. Before I proceed, well, actually, let me do this exam tip. So an exam tip, in order to copy and paste, is Control-Shift-C and Control-Shift-V as far as your keyboard shortcuts go. So this will save you a little bit of time. You can right-click and copy and right-click and paste. That works too. But Control-Shift-C and Control-Shift-V will get you, will allow you to utilize your keyboard shortcuts to copy and paste things from the documentation into your terminal. And with that, I just want to take a pause for a second to answer any questions that you have so far. And if you don't have any questions, that's fine. We'll just go ahead and proceed.
No, Chad, as far as in the chat, I don't see anyone in the comments right now. But as soon as people have some questions, I will actually interrupt you.
Okay, great. studykates.club/CKA-ENV is a short link that you can follow to navigate to the handbook, which includes a screenshot of this where you can view that on your own if you'd like, and get more familiar with the PSI bridge, is called, and how to be best prepared for that.
Yes. So, Chad, we have one question.
Okay.
Your book, Acing the CK Exam, does it cover the latest updates to the CK exams?
Yes. So my book is up to 1.28, which is the current version of Kubernetes for the exam. And so I'll just, what's that?
Got it. Great. So I think that's answer his question.
All right. I will go ahead and just interrupt me if you have any more questions. So the exam environment looks like this. You'll have access to 6 clusters in total. These are actually the name of the clusters. And when you go from question to question, you'll be asked to change your context. If you're not familiar with what changing your context means, it just means that you're changing your scope in what cluster you're looking at inside of the kubectl terminal. So you'll go from task to task, and each task, and I would highly encourage you to do that at the beginning of each task. It's to change your context to whatever context will be for that task. It'll say that at the very beginning of the task, and it'll also provide the kubectl context command that will get you that will change your context for you. So highly encourage you to copy and paste that command into the terminal so that you're making sure that you're working on the correct cluster for the task. I can't stress this enough because there have been many people that have come up to me over the years and have said, I was working on the wrong cluster for this particular task, and so that I only realized it after I went to the next task, and then therefore I had to start over. And so that not only wastes a lot of time, but it's very discouraging on the exam, as you can imagine, to putting all that work into that task and then having to go back and correct it, or possibly create some problems for future questions, being that you may switch back and forth from cluster to cluster. So these clusters are configured with either the Flannel CNI or the Calico CNI. CNI, again, is the cluster network interface, which allows the pod-to-pod communication in the cluster. And so you will have different tasks based on whatever CNI that is. And the very last one is called loopback CNI, which is actually not a CNI at all. It just indicates that you may need to install a CNI for that task when you're working on this cluster, and or you may need to take that missing node and add that node into the existing cluster. So that may be if you're working on the iKates cluster, that very well may be your task for that particular cluster. But this just gets you familiar with all the clusters and how, what to expect as far as the control plane components and the worker nodes, and what all is going to be kind of there when you're switching back and forth from each one of these clusters. So exam tip in this case is to, again, always change your context before each and every task. The commands are provided, so copy and paste and do that every single time, no matter what. All right, so all the exercises that we'll be going through in this workshop will be available on the Killer Coda environment. Killer Coda is a sister company, or is a partner company with Killer Shell. So the Killer Shell, as I mentioned before, killer.sh is the exam simulator environment that's provided with the exam. Killer Coda is a similar lab environment where you can sign up for free on killercoda.com and start up a Kubernetes cluster within seconds and be able to run your kubectl commands. And it's really a fantastic way to use, as long as you have internet connection, use this lab environment from your browser and not have to worry about installing prerequisites or installing Docker or Minikube or Kind or what have you. So this is a quick, easy way to get up and running, and especially since it's free, you'll be able to utilize this for a lot of practice on the exam, and also in the questions that we're about to go through. So I highly encourage you, if you haven't already, right now, pause this video if you're watching this on the replay, go to killercoda.com and sign up for an account if you haven't already.
Yes, so 2 questions. And Chad, one of them I think you'll be covering in a minute, is I saw some recommendation to use aliases in kubectl command. Do you recommend it? I believe there should, because otherwise you can't complete exam with a long, tedious command.
Yeah, I highly encourage you to utilize the existing alias that's already set up for you, which is the alias K, which is alias to kubectl. And you can create however many aliases you want on the exam. Another popular one is the dry run equals client command, which we'll get to in a second, which allows you to essentially build the scaffolding for the YAML for any resource, pod, deployment, service, etc. And we'll save you some typing there as well. So 2 popular aliases, K, which will already be set for you, so you don't have to set that alias when you take the exam. And then also you can create an alias for the dry run command, which we'll get to in a second.
Another question is there any negative point if some wrong operation is performed?
No negative points. Just there is partial credit, there is no credit, but there's no negative points.
Got it. I think this make you happy, Miriam, and if feel free to ask more question if you have. So I thanks. Good.
All right, so let's start with a little bit of a warm-up. If you go to studykates.club/CKA-warmup, you'll be directed to a Killer Coda environment. I'm actually going to do that in my browser now. So if I go to this link here, I'm going to copy it and paste it into my browser. Let's try that again. Sorry. All right, so if I paste that into my browser, I will be directed to a particular lab environment within the Killer Coda platform. So I will go ahead and bump up the font a little bit so you can see. And this is our lab environment. So if we do get nodes, for example, we'll see that we have access almost instantaneously to the 2-node cluster here, control plane and worker node. And they're running 1.28, which is the version for the exam. So going through the warm-up, we're first going to warm up by listing all the API resources in the cluster. What this allows us to do is see all the clusters that were, all the resources that we're able to create in Kubernetes, and also to take a special notice to the shortcuts. So the shortcuts for things like pods and deployments, so that you can save time on the exam and type the shortcut to the resource as opposed to typing the entire resource out in the terminal. So let's do that. This is a simple command. So kubectl, or K for short, again, utilize those aliases like we just mentioned, and then API-resources. And so this gets the resources for the cluster and for Kubernetes. And so I'll just pipe this to less so we can see this in from the top. So this includes the columns name, short name, API version, namespace, and kind. So the special attention to the short names. So instead of component statuses, I don't think you'll be using component statuses on the exam. So let's go down to something more applicable. So namespaces, for example. So namespaces is right here, kind of in the middle of the screen. And so instead of typing out namespaces, we can type NS. So let's do that. So let's clear the screen. Hey, get NS instead of namespaces. So namespaces. And so these are the same commands. It just provides a little bit of a shortcut to prevent typos and not having to type the full name of the resource out. Another handy shortcut is, instead of typing out for pods, let's say I want to list the pods in the kube system. Let's say I want to list pods in the default namespace and also the kube system namespace. So I could do get pods and then -n for namespace, and then actually I can do all namespaces, or I can do a shortcut of just dash and then capital A. So those are the same commands. The -A is a lot easier to remember and to perform, in my opinion, and so hopefully you find the same. All right, so we've listed all the API resources. Now let's try to utilize the help menu as our friend to give us a hint as to how to what's the syntax for the kubectl commands. So use the help menu to find example commands and syntax. So we can use any type of resource we want. Let's just use pods for simplicity. So we'll do, let's do k run pod, which is the command to create a pod. And let's just do -h. Actually, you know what? We can just do k-h to get clues as to what commands need to be next. So if I do the k-h to bring up the help command, I'll see in the help command is run somewhere in here. Yeah, here it is. So run a particular image on the cluster. And so this creates a pod. It doesn't say that, but that's what it does. And so these help menus are really helpful for not only getting clues as to what command comes next or the syntax for the commands itself, but also when we're performing the k run pod, for example, and we do a -h to bring up the help menu, you can scroll up here and get examples on full commands that we can copy and paste right into our terminal. So let's say I didn't want to type out this big long command that includes a number of labels and images and all that. I could just copy and paste into my terminal here. Let me do this. So I can paste. Hopefully you can see the bottom of the screen. So paste that command in, and now this pod has been created. Maybe you want to change the name of the pod or anything like that, but now we have a pod running in the default namespace, and we can do k-get pods, and we can see that the status of that pod. So it's in container creating, and we can do -w to watch as it comes up, and so on and so forth. So that's a good warm-up exercise for you. And so now let's go back to our slides. Now that we've done the help menu, let's list the status of the kubelet service running in the Kubernetes node. So this is a very possible thing that you'll have to do on the exam, is to try to troubleshoot the kubelet and figure out, being that the kubelet is a daemon that's running on the Linux node, it's going to be the only daemon that's running on the node itself, as opposed to all the other services that are running in pods on the node. The kubelet is a very good service to know about. And so we'll go back to our lab environment, and we'll do systemctl status kubelet, and we'll see that the kubelet service is active and running. Maybe we want to restart kubelet for whatever reason. We can do a restart with the systemctl, and we can even do a stop. And let's get the status again. It's now inactive and dead. So let's start it back up and do the status again, and now it's active and running again. So those are simple commands for how to troubleshoot and stop and start the kubelet service. Next exercise, as we continue to warm up here, is list the running pods and namespaces. I already kind of cheated here and gave you the answer to this one, but use the kubectl to show namespaces and list the pods in the kube system namespace. So switch back over to our terminal. And again, we just did this a moment ago, so I gave away the answer. But get pods in all namespaces, or we can do -n for the namespace, and then kube-system is the name of the kube system namespace. And so list the pods in the kube system namespace. So yeah, we already did get namespaces as well, so we can do that again and see all the namespaces that are listed. If we wanted to create a namespace, k-create namespace, or ns for short, and then let's say we wanted to create the namespace web. And if we get the namespaces again, we'll see we have a new namespace. So it's easy as that to create a new namespace, and then we can start to create different Kubernetes resources inside of that namespace. A namespace is more or less a kind of virtual environment that kind of separates resources in terms of networking and storage to be able to kind of provide a isolation more or less between different environments that you may have running inside of the same cluster. All right, so the very last warm-up exercise here. Hopefully you're keeping up and are plenty warmed up by now. But the last exercise here is to dry run, use the dry run. So this is what I was talking about before, which is a common alias in that you may want to set for the exam. Don't have to, but you may want to. So use kubectl dry run to create the YAML for a pod. So let's switch back over to our terminal. And so we already know this because we just ran it. So k run, and then we'll name our pod nginx, and then we'll use the image nginx, and then we'll do --dry -run equals client, and then output that to YAML, and then we'll just call this pod.yaml. So now in our current directory, we have this file named pod.yaml. If we open that up in our Vim editor, we'll see that we have the YAML for a pod. And we can make modifications to this, such as adding maybe a volume and a volume mount path, or perhaps we want to add some labels, remove some labels, modify some labels, whatever you want to do. This creates a good template for you to use, and would highly encourage you to utilize this to the greatest extent on the exam. And so maybe I want to, provide an alias to that. So alias dry run equals client. I have to put this in quotes, I think. And then I'll tack on the OYAML as well, equal to let's just do dash dry run. You can include the dashes in there. So that's and then we can see our aliases here and see what's available to us. So yeah, that may be an alias that you want to set on the exam. It's up to you.
Yes, and Chad, one quick question from Raghu.
Sure.
Today, I have cleared the CKAD exam months ago, and I work with managed Kubernetes cluster on a regular basis. So do you have some suggestion for me to look upon cluster administrative things before going for the exam?
Yes. So being that you are primarily familiar with managed Kubernetes, which every single managed Kubernetes environment does not allow you to access the control plane node, and also does not allow you to access etcd in a lot of cases. So my suggestion in that case is to become very familiar with the control plane components, particularly what's running on those control plane components. So if we look at that real quick, we can see in the kube system space, and then we'll do a O wide as well to see what node these pods are running on. We'll see on the right-hand side here, the control plane, which is the name of the node. All these pods are running, all these core components are running on the control plane as pods. So you have Calico, which is the CNI that we mentioned before. We have Core DNS, which is the DNS, provides domain name resolution for inside of the cluster. etcd, which is the configuration for the cluster. This is a data store and provides you with the current state of your cluster. So etcd is very important in terms of backing it up and restoring it. So that's something that I would be very familiar with for the exam. API server controller manager, Kubectl, which provides the IP tables rules for services, and then the Kubectl. Become familiar with all of those components, being that you are probably not familiar with them, having been using managed Kubernetes. So my suggestion. All right, so we've gone through all these warm-up exercises. I hope everyone's warmed up. So let's, if you want to go through the answers to those warm-up questions, go to studykates.club/tka-warmup-answers. And so those are the commands that will be made available to you that we just went through on the screen. So either rewind the video if you're watching this on the replay, or go to that link, which is a GitHub gist, and so you can copy and paste those into your own terminal at a later time. All right, so as I just mentioned, etcd is a very important part of the kubeadm version, bootstrapped version of Kubernetes, which is the version that's used on the exam. So unlike the managed Kubernetes or the K3S, for example, or any other type of Kubernetes distribution, this particular bootstrap way of bootstrapping, and bootstrapping just means setting up the cluster, initializing it, is used by kubeadm. Kubeadm is a very popular tool that's used for Kubernetes and allows you to do a lot of things, not only bootstrap your cluster, but also upgrade the components of the Kubernetes control plane components. So the Kubectl, Controller Manager, API Server, etcd, core DNS, and all of those essential kind of core components, as we call them. But also it allows you to add a node to a cluster by printing a join command, and all that fun stuff that involves cluster maintenance, so to speak. So kubeadm is what you'll need to know for the type of cluster that's used on the exam, kubeadm. All right, but going back to etcd, etcd is very important for backing up the cluster state. So this is the configuration for the entire cluster, which is stored in etcd. The etcd data store is very important in terms of, having having your cluster in a current state, in a good state. So backing up the etcd is a very good idea, which a lot of us do in the real world as well. So let's go through an exercise of doing this. First off, let's go to studykates.club/tka-etcd-backup, and you'll be directed to a specific lab environment, again on Killer Coda, that you'll be able to use for the exercises that we're going through. And so I will do that as well. So studykates.club/tka-etcd-backup, different lab environment that we were just in before. And then if you want to utilize the left-hand side here to copy and paste commands, I highly encourage you to do that. But we'll be going through the similar type exercises as we're going through here. So first off, on the exam, you'll want to use a particular version of etcd-ctl. etcd-ctl is another command line tool, much like kubectl, which is available to you to interface with etcd and perform the backup and restore operations. So, much like kubectl, etcd-ctl comes with a help menu. So etcd, let me bump up the font so you can see a little bit better. And let's move this over. And so if we do etcd-ctl, -H, we can see a number of things that give us clues as to what commands we want to run in order to back up and restore and do other things with etcd. Another important thing to kind of realize or memorize for the exam is to notate the version of the API that's used for etcd-ctl. So you can either pull up the help menu like this and ensure that you're running API version 3, or you can manually set your API version using the following command. So export, and then this is setting an environment variable in Linux, is very basic, but it's etcd-ctl_API equals 3. The etcd-ctl command line is looking for that particular environment variable, setting that to 3, and then you can run that help command again, or you can do etcd-ctl version, and you can see that the version is now 3.5.0. 3, major version is what we're after here in order to perform the correct commands that we're going to perform. So going back over to the slides, now that we've set the version of etcd-ctl to version 3 using an environment variable, let's go on to perform a snapshot backup of etcd. So let's use etcd-ctl to back up the etcd data store and the Kubernetes configuration itself. And so let's go back to our terminal and do that. And so on the left-hand side, we can either copy and paste from the text here, or we can I would suggest doing that actually, because this is quite a long command. So from left-hand side, I'll just copy this command and I'll paste it into the terminal and then explain what it is. So etcd-ctl snapshot save snapshot is, we're just going to call it snapshot. Snapshot is the name of the snapshot. I guess it's could have used a different name here. So I can do snapshot 2 or maybe etcd backup. I can call it anything I want, but I'm just going to call it snapshot. And then because etcd has its own server certificate, we have to pass in the CA cert, the cert, and the key in order to authenticate to etcd. This is very important because for a couple of reasons. One, because you can't just any resource or anything can't just access the etcd data store anonymously. And then also this allows us to have some sort of protection against any malicious actors or anybody basically that doesn't need access to etcd, so that we can maintain our etcd cluster or our etcd data store in a healthy state. So we pass in these certificates in order to authenticate, and these certificates are in a special directory. And we'll become very familiar with this directory because it contains a lot more than just the certificates, but also kubeconfigs, as we'll get to in a second. So etc Kubernetes, that particular directory is a very good one to know just in general. All right, so the snapshot was saved. So if I list the contents of my current directory, we'll see that we have a snapshot. It's just called snapshot. So it's a snapshot of our etcd cluster, our etcd data store. Sorry, etcd can be a cluster, but in this case, it's just a single member. Fun fact, etcd can be configured in a raft consensus algorithm in order to provide a kind of high availability for your etcd data store. But that is besides the point here. Let's go back to the slides and go on to the next.
Yes. So, Chad, sorry for the interruption. There's one question. So these are the long commands. I'm actually showing this on the screen. So I think the people are asking questions. Should we find those in the Kubernetes docs? So those are available because the Kubernetes docs you can actually use during the certification. Because memorizing, it's absolutely difficult.
Yeah, don't memorize things. Either use the help menu or use the Kubernetes documentation. That's what it's there for. So I highly encourage you to utilize those tools to help you on the exam.
Got it. Absolutely. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, thanks. Good question. So let's simulate a kind of a problem with our cluster, and let's go ahead and delete the daemon set. In particular, the kubeproxy daemon set. So the reason why we're doing this is because we're going to perform a restore in a second, and in order to check that the restore was successful, we're going to check that this daemon set has been restored correctly. So we'll delete the daemon set to simulate a catastrophic event, because obviously we need kubeproxy. It provides us with the essential kind of communication mechanisms for our cluster. So deleting the kubeproxy daemon set is obviously very bad. So let's list our data sets first of all. So if we wanted to get daemon sets, just do all namespaces, and we'll see in the kube system namespace is both the canal and the kubeproxy daemon set. Kubeproxy is the one that we're after here, and it's currently running. Desired and current state is both 1. So let's go ahead and delete it. So k delete yes, and then it's the kube system. And all right, so I'm hitting the tab key on my keyboard, and it's not auto completing for some reason. And I did that on purpose because I want to demonstrate a point. Using the tab completion is very useful, particularly for the exam, because when you get into resources that have longer names, such as pods within a deployment, you don't want to have to type out the full name of the pod. For example, let's go through this. Let's delete the daemon set first, and then I'll show you about the pod names. So to try to utilize the autocomplete, and it's just bash completion that allows you to hit the tab key and have the name of that resource autocomplete. I have to start with the namespace. So kube system, and I'm hitting the tab key to autocomplete here as well. And I would highly encourage you to get familiar with, I know that it may be somewhat uncomfortable, but get familiar with putting the namespace right after the kubectl command, or right after the K. This will save you a whole ton of time, not only in getting the correct name of the resource, but also it'll allow you to utilize autocomplete and just be more efficient overall. All right, so now I can delete ds, and then now if I do, I just typed K and hit the tab key, and it auto-completed to kubeproxy. All right, so now let's just verify that I've deleted that daemon set. And so yeah, now only the canal daemon set is available, and there's no kube system or kubeproxy daemon set. So now we're good. We have successfully initiated a catastrophic event in our cluster, which is hopefully our restore goes well, right? All right. Just to continue my point about the autocomplete thing. So we have all these pods in the kube system namespace, right? So in the kube system namespace are all these pods. And see how this long name, kube controller manager control plane. So I wouldn't necessarily want to type that whole thing out on the exam. So this is why we can do kube system first, as far as the specifying the namespace, and then I can do get pods, and then I can use the autocomplete to autocomplete the name, tab completion. All right, so That is a really good way, especially as you get into the names of resources, no matter if it's a pod or namespace or any type of resource. It will help you a lot, believe me. All right, so now that we've deleted the namespace, let's go back to the next exercise. Oops. All right, we deleted the daemon set, so now let's restore from snapshot. So hopefully our restore goes successfully so that we can get our daemon set back and have utilized kubeproxy to the greatest extent. All right, so let's go back to our terminal and start the restore. Okay, so just actually a note about like if you wanted to check the status of the backup, we could utilize this command etcd snapshot status and just output that to a table. It's more aesthetically pleasing, but obviously what you want to look for here is the total size being greater than 0, right? So if you're looking at the status of your snapshot and it's 0, that means that the backup was not successful. So you wouldn't want to proceed past that point. You'd want to try the snapshot again. All right, so let's perform the snapshot restore. So the command for that is etcd-ctl snapshot restore, and then the name of the snapshot, which I realize now is very confusing, snapshot. And then what we're going to do here is specify a data directory. So we're going to store this this restore in a particular directory. That directory is var lib etcd-restore, and that was not a random selection. That's actually the location of the existing etcd data store, the current version. Var lib is a directory where etcd is currently restored and so or currently stored. So we're gonna place this restore version of etcd right beside it so that we can make some intelligent choices and efficient choices for our restore operation. All right, so a lot of output here, but essentially what you're looking for is snapshot successful, which should be somewhere. Yeah, restored snapshot is what we're looking for here, and then we can even list the contents of that directory. So let's do ls on var lib, and then we'll grep for etcd. So now we have etcd and etcd restore. So there we go. All right. The reason why we put these two versions, we'll say, of etcd next to each other is because this makes it very easy to modify the, and I'm maybe getting ahead of myself, so let me just, yeah. So the last exercise here, once we've done the restore and specified our var lib etcd restore location, we're going to update the etcd manifest. So update the etcd manifest. Where is the etcd manifest, you may be asking? So remember I told you that you should notate the etcd Kubernetes directory. So if we do etc Kubernetes, this is a very important directory for a lot of different reasons. We use the PKI directory inside of this directory to specify the certificates that we used for performing the backup, right? But you also will take notice of the manifest directory. Inside of the manifest directory is all of our control plane components. So API server, controller manager, scheduler, etcd. This will be the same on the exam. So this is very important to know, and also important to know is that you must be on the control plane in order to view this directory. On the exam, you'll just be on a jump host, and so you can simply use SSH control plane if that's the name of the control plane, and then SSH to the control plane, and then go to the etc Kubernetes manifest directory. So important to note there. anything in this directory, well, the kubelet will automatically pick up and start running inside of your cluster. So these happen to be running inside of the kube system namespace. But if I were to create just a simple pod here in this directory, it'll automatically be picked up by kubelet and run without me having to do anything. Usually, in any other case, you would have to run the kubectl create command or the kubectl apply command to kind of submit that YAML to the API. But anything in this directory does not have to go through that process, being that the scheduler is not aware of it. So anything in here is going to run automatically. So being that that is the case, be careful with this directory and what kind of modifications you're making to the YAML. In this case, because I'm modifying the etcd.yaml right here, I'm going to create a copy of it just to make sure that if I mess anything up, I have a copy to restore from. So I'm going to copy etcd.ctl or etcd.yaml, sorry. Copy etc Kubernetes manifest, etcd.ctl, and I'm going to copy that to my current directory, or I can just do my home directory. Oops, that's not what I want to do. So if I do ls in my home directory, now I see I have a copy of etcd.yaml. I have it in my home directory as opposed to the manifest directory because I don't want two versions of etcd running in the cluster. I just want one. All right, so let's modify that etcd.yaml. So again, etcd or etc Kubernetes manifest, and then etcd.yaml. All right, so if I go to the very bottom of this page, I'll notice that there's volumes that are associated with both the etcd certs and the etcd data. The one that we're going to change is the second one, the etcd data, being that we created a snapshot and now we're going to intend to restore that snapshot. So see, it's the varlib directory, varlib. So we're just going to change this to, instead of typing in a new directory, we're just going to do restore. And that's the only change that we need to make in order to have that restored version of etcd implemented or take effect. Varlib etcd restore is what we named it. So let's save and quit. And now we notice our cluster is kind of in a wonky state here. And that's because I changed the etcd YAML in that certain directory. This is going to restart the API. So the API is not available right now. So that's why I'm not able to get pods or do anything basically. Kubernetes is going to be unavailable for a while because the etcd pod in the kube system namespace is being restarted. So during that time, the Kubernetes cluster is going to become unavailable. So just wait a number of minutes or maybe possibly even seconds for that to restart. And then if I don't, obviously if I don't ever get that to restart and I can't run my kubectl commands, that's where we implement our copy of etcd.yaml and we copy that back over to the manifest directory. Or we can use cryctl and then see the pods that are running on this node, being that the etcd pod is running here. Oh, it's not running yet. So I see that it's not running. That means it's in the process of restarting. So if I do cry ps and then I grep for etcd, maybe I'll see that come back up within a certain amount of time. Yeah, modifying that YAML is the reason why we're not seeing the etcd pod running using cryctl. So cryctl is a good tool to use for the exam as well, just because it allows you to see the containers that are running. The containers being the in this case the control plane components, control plane component pods, or you can SSH to the worker node and see the application pods that are running, or application containers rather. And you can do certain things with cryctl, much like you can with Docker. So that's why you can do cryctl ps just like we would Docker ps or Docker container ls. So let's see if yeah, so it usually takes a while to do this. So while we're doing this, we'll go back to our slides, and let's see, how are we doing on time?
Chad, we actually 5 minute go past now, but
Okay.
no worries. We actually can complete this exercise and then we let it off, and we can actually move other part to the part number 2 that we actually planned already.
Yeah, we can save the rest of the exercises for part 2. I like that idea.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so just to close out, I just wanted to mention, again, who I am: CNCF ambassador, Kubernetes engineer, and coach. I have this platform called kubeskills.com, which is a kind of a social platform helping people pass their CKA, CKAD, and CKS, as well as just it's a good place to learn and get connected with people all in the same situation that you may be in, which is learning containers and Kubernetes. And these are all my socials. And so check me out. Feel free to, all my DMs are open. So feel free to send me a message if you have any questions with what we just covered or anything about the book as well.
Yes, absolutely. And there's one question from Kimi. He said, could we install something like Emacs if I like it more than Vim? I
Yes,
suppose not.
you can. Yep. Emacs. You just have to change your default editor. So let's see what there's an environment variable for that as well. So what is it? I'm drawing a blank right now. So it's yeah. So editor. It's just editor. So export and then editor. So let's see, grep for editor. It's not in the killer code environment, but it will be in the exam environment. So the default is Vim, but yes, you can change it to Nano is another popular one that you could possibly change it to in order to not only be able to use it with with the YAML that you're creating for pods, deployments, etc., but also when you do a kubectl edit, for example. So let's just do this real quick. So nginx image nginx. So if we have an nginx pod running, anyway, if we had a pod running, we could do kubectl edit pod and then the name of the pod, and then that brings it up by default in a Vim text editor, but changing that editor environment variable will bring it up in Nano if you so choose, or any other editor of your choice.
Yes, absolutely. I think and I think the next question people might have, like, if you want to choose it, you'll go to another VM editor. The only thing you have to do, you have to memorize the command, how you want to switch to the other, because on the certification page, you can't search for other website to understand what is the command to change the other editor. And I think another question people might have is, like, I think that's the final question we can wrap up here. Sometimes people are very good with the Kubernetes and very good with the skills the Kubernetes have, but sometimes they came from the Microsoft background and they don't have full capabilities to a Vim editor or these editor, and this takes substantial amount of time as well. So any resources for learning these Vim command to in order to be more proficient during the exam with Vim editor or Nano editor?
Hmm. Good question. I get this question a lot, actually. And there's a lot of free resources out there. I don't necessarily promote one or the other. But what you need to know with Vim is very basic. You need to know how to escape out of Vim. So using the command to close the file after you've made your edits or created the file, you should know how to get to the bottom of the file and to the top of the file using the keyboard shortcuts. So Shift G and GG, which are the keyboard shortcuts for going from the top of the file to the bottom of the file. Going to the end of the line in a line within the file. So going all the way to the right to the end of the line. So that's a Shift and then 4 on the keyboard. And then going to the beginning of the line, Shift 6 on the keyboard. And that's it. So just play back this video, and that's all you need to know for or I should probably say escaping out of Vim is. So if I have Vim open, colon is going to be a good thing to know. Colon W for save, or you can do W and Q for quit. And if you get into a lot of trouble, you can do Q and then exclamation point to just completely escape and start over. So yeah, replay this video, and that's all you need to know for Vim.
Thank you. It's been a great remarks from the audience. It really motivated us for part number 2. Thank you, Miriam, for your kind remarks, and thank you, SRAK, for actually letting you know feedback as well. So with that, chat, it's been a super. I don't want to interrupt you. I really enjoy the pace we're actually going forward it, but I wanted to make it a smoother because we have a part 2 actually already been planned. So I will give you some resources for the people who join us today. I think first thing first, if you're completely new to the Kubernetes and CKA, make sure you actually visit this website and see how the laydown of the structure exists for the exam. Like what are the different components that you need to be understand for acing the exam. And the best resource, and one of my best resource right now, is the book by Chad, the Acing the CK exam. I think it's covered. It has mock exam and some tips and tricks, even some areas for the Vim editor as well. So it's one of your resources to understand how you actually acing the exam as well. And then there are some prep guide people has created. Basically, they created a repository, listed down some of the portion of the exam, and then they basically actually there are clickable links to understand for each portion of the exam where you learn more about the current domain where you're learning about. So these are the repository we have created. And then there's a Valish Shari has created a wonderful repository for same kind of learning resources for the people as well. So make sure you check out that house as well. And follow us for the Cloud Islamabad, because we will be notify you for the part number 2. Hopefully we'll be arranging next week. And subscribe to this YouTube channel. And we will be live again. And make sure to actually go to this website if we actually want to notify for the CKA part 2 as well. And this will be great speaking with you, chat, and the great remarks coming up our way as well. And that's what happened when Chad actually explaining the concept. So people join us, ask question, and at the end they really appreciated the effort. So once again, thank you very much, Chad, for joining and sharing the wonderful knowledge you have in the Kubernetes space. So we'll meet you again for part number 2. With that, thank you everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a wonderful rest of the day or night.
Thanks, everyone. See you for part 2.